my husband in the second row. What an amazing group. I'm kind of frazzled because I woke up at 4 o'clock in Phoenix, 4 a.m., and I got to the airport expecting it to be deserted, so I didn't leave a ton of time. It was not deserted. The Phoenix airport at 4:30 is a zoo. And then, so I'm halfway through my tour right now, so I think this is stop 6, we'll say. I have not had a single flight delay the whole time.
Yeah.
Today was the day I really did not need a delay because I was supposed to land here at about 12:45, and I was going to hustle to the hotel and get here by 3. So I'm in Denver, where I connected, and I fly a lot. So, like, you can read the gate agent's face. You don't even need to hear an announcement. And I was like, dang it, this thing is going to be delayed. Sure enough, it was delayed. So I roll in, my husband picks me up at the airport, like, literally an hour ago. And I showered, and I got ready, and I got dressed, and I'm here. And I'm so excited. And I also had a Celsius energy drink. So, like, if I seem wired, I am. But I'm here, and that's what I'm happy about. And I see so many familiar faces, family, of course, friends from college, some of my best friends right there in the center, lots of old Coke employees, not old Coke employees. I used to work at Coke, so I see some familiar faces. And this is also exciting because I understand this is the largest event that Watermark has had under the new ownership. So I'm really thrilled to sort of embark on this relationship. As authors, we have close relationships with indie bookstores all over the country, and I'm very excited about the new ownership and whatever those changes might entail. So I thought what I would do today is spend maybe 20-25 minutes kind of talking about my inspiration and research for the Amalfi Curse, and then we'll do Q&A. My audiences always have a lot of questions, so I expect questions. I don't want you to be shy. And then after that, we will do a signing, and I'm happy to take photos. Amy, did Lily make it?
She's over there.
Oh, hi, Lily. I was like, where is your daughter? This is my goddaughter, and she is going to be our little photography assistant tonight, so that whoever wants a photo with me, she will be taking it on your phone, because she's tech savvy, because she's young, and she knows all the cameras. So that's the plan. Does that sound good? Yeah. Okay. You are all so happy. I love your energy. This is wonderful. All right. So the Amalfi Curse. I don't even have a copy with me. Someone yesterday was like, do you carry around a copy of your book? And I'm like, it's really funny. I'm on tour for this, and I literally don't have a copy with me. I have one copy at home. But this is my 3rd book, and it's so special to me. Thank you, Melissa. It's my sister-in-law here in the front. Because my first 2 books were set in London, of course. Who here has read, like, The Lost Apothecary? Okay, and who here has read book 2? Okay. Oh, great. So I knew if I set a 3rd book in London, I would be kind of pigeonholing myself, and readers would come to think that Sarah Penner writes back alleyway London books, which are great. That's very atmospheric. I like that vibe. But I envision a long writing career of all sorts of different books, and I didn't want to just stay in that lane. So when I signed a contract for book 3, I did not know where my 3rd book was going to be set. I only knew that it wasn't going to be London. So in 2022, my husband and I took a trip to Italy, and we had dedicated about a week of that to the Amalfi Coast. And I remember telling him, if I don't walk away from this trip with a story idea, and I'm under contract, the clock is ticking, I don't know what I'm going to do. But for anybody who's been to the Amalfi Coast, who here has been there? So just a few. Okay. Well, you're in for a treat, because the book will make you feel like you're there. It's a feast for the senses. And I remember having my notes app on my phone open and just writing down everything I was seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, because everything about this part of Italy is lush and opulent and beautiful. So, for example, there was one afternoon we were walking through this little street in the village, and the air, I commented that it smelled like olive oil. And every meal afterwards, you get a little thing of limoncello. And there's walls of hot pink bougainvillea vines everywhere you look. And sparrows flitting in and out of roof soffits. So just so many incredible details that as soon as I got there, I remember thinking this would be an incredible setting for a book. Also, on the west side of the village, there's a hilltop, the village of Positano, I should say. There's a hilltop with an abandoned villa. And I looked at that villa and I told my husband, Mark, I don't know how it's going to feature in my next book, but that villa will be in my next book. And immediately I just started to sort of plant these seeds of a book 3 idea. So a few of those seeds, I've already talked about how Positano was just very inspiring from a sensory perspective, and then the villa was there as well. But it's on the ocean. Everywhere you look, it's just beautiful cliffside and ocean. So I started to think, okay, this is going to be a water-based book. And then I was just doing some really brief research on the area, and I learned that these 3 little islets right off the coast of Positano are where several of the legendary sirens are said to have originated. So that sparked an interest. I'm thinking, okay, maybe I have these women who descended from the sirens. So that was a seed. And then I also learned amongst these 3 islets, there are a lot of shipwrecks. In real life, a lot of mariners have run into these little islets or met sort of ill-fated journeys in this area. So that really intrigued me as well. So I decided to write a book about a nautical archaeologist in the present day. So this is a woman who investigates and explores shipwrecks. And she's investigating in particular this mysterious cluster of wrecks right off the coast of Positano near these 3 islets that I've been talking about. And she begins to suspect that they are tied to a coven of witches who lived in the area 200 years earlier. And these witches are women with an inborn power over the ocean, and they are descended from the sirens. So all of these little seeds kind of came together into this story, and there were a few things that worked out really well. One of them is that my husband and I are scuba divers. We have been for more than 10 years. We actually got certified here in Wichita, of all places. I have told that to all of these other tour stops that I got certified in landlocked Kansas, and it draws a lot of laughs. So I don't know if the place is still here. I don't even remember what it's called, but is it still here? Are you certified as well? You looked into it. Okay. They took us on our final check dive at this lake in Arkansas. And we rode in this van with this group of just like crazy people for 6-7 hours. And Mark and I've never told this, but I'm about to. There was this teenager sitting in the back on his phone, of course, half the ride. He didn't say a word to anybody. He was just staring at his phone for hours. Well, then it died. And he didn't have a charger, and so he set his phone down, and he looked up, and to the whole van, he announced, "So, how y'all doing?" And we still, to this day, say that, joke about that. We'll walk into a room and be like, "So, how y'all doing?" Because, this kid, just as soon as his phone died, he was like, "I'm ready to engage with humanity." So, it was just really funny. And, like I said, it's the first time I've ever told that story, so it's kind of fun going to these different events and seeing what pops up in my brain and what fresh stories I'm going to embark on. So we got certified. We've been diving all over the world. My personal favorite diving was Thailand because the schools of fish are so enormous that you swim toward them, they kind of open up for you, and then you swim into them and they close around you, just like you see in National Geographic. So that's my favorite diving, but also the Florida Keys comes really close because that's where we've done our wreck diving for the most part. There are thousands of wrecks in the Florida Keys. You'll learn a little bit more about that because my protagonist in the present day, she learns to dive with her father in the Florida Keys. But the keys are so shallow that prior to modern navigational equipment, sailors didn't realize that they were approaching such shallow reefs, and so they would run aground, and unfortunately a lot of them perished, and we have the wrecks now as relics of that. But it's great diving because it is so shallow that the water's warm, you don't need a wetsuit, the visibility is generally pretty good because there's a lot of sunlight, and the best part is the marine life because these wrecks create sort of an artificial habitat. So sharks, sea turtles, one of the wrecks we went on was filled with, they called it a lobster graveyard because all of these lobster would go there to molt their shells. So the wreck, like the whole of the boat, the ship was just covered in lobster exoskeletons. Like, when are you ever going to see that? I didn't even know that lobsters shed their shells. You probably didn't either, but now you know. So that was really cool, writing these dive scenes that my nautical archaeologist goes on, and sort of for you as the reader, relaying some of that sensory experience to you. So the feeling of the cold water flooding your wetsuit, the discomfort in your ears as you descend and you need to equalize because of the pressure. The underwater communication. You can scream into your mouthpiece underwater and nobody will hear you. Really the only two ways to communicate are hand signals. So like ascend, descend, okay. Hand signals or tapping a little piece of metal on your air tank because metal against metal, actually that sound travels really well underwater. So all of these fun little details I got to incorporate into the dive scenes in this book as my character is investigating these shipwrecks. I also acquired 2 online certifications in nautical archaeology because I don't know how you excavate a shipwreck safely and from a professional standpoint, and I wanted to write this character's profession as authentically as I could. So if anybody is into that, the NAS, the National Archaeology Society, they have classes online. I'm sorry, Nautical Archaeology Society. They have classes online you can take and learn all about how to photograph wrecks and cool stuff like that. And I think the last piece that's relevant to my research for the story is about the witches in the book. And witchcraft in Italy, the Italian word is stregaria. And there's a very strong legacy of witchcraft in Italy, but the women in my story, the witches are in the historical narrative, they're not wicked, they're not sinister, they're not sitting over their cauldrons. They are just women who were born with power over the ocean. And they use it for good until the plot unfolds as it does, and some of these women are faced with really difficult choices. So I found that really interesting as well, learning about some of the traditions around Italian witchcraft. So my husband and I did go back in 2023 for our second and final trip to sort of close up some research gaps. We went to an archive in Naples, which inspired the archive in the book. We hired a private boat driver to take us around the islets that are featured in the story. We hiked Mount Vesuvius, which is the largest active mainland volcano in Europe, and saw the steam coming out of the craters, which really alarmed me, but it's completely normal. The wind, there were gusts of wind at the top of the crater that must have been 45, 50 miles an hour, almost could like barely stand at times. So that was a really cool experience. I highly recommend if you ever visit that area. And then one of the characters in the book, his name is Enzo. His name was inspired by a really delicious French dinner that my husband and I had in Positano. We were sitting there, and there was a very handsome server at the table next to us, and I overheard him say his name was Enzo. Hi. Are you looking for something? You want to sit down? Perfect. Front row. Look at you go, Julia. So there was this really handsome server at the table next to us, and his name was Enzo, and I looked at my husband, and, again, this was sort of when this book was sort of little seeds starting to come to me, and I said, okay, Mark, I hope this doesn't offend you, but I'm going to name one of the love interests in my book after this guy, Enzo. And I told this same story at my launch event in Tampa, which was on last Monday, I guess a week ago tomorrow. And he is so witty. So I told this whole story about Enzo and how he's really attractive, da 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 da. And then I always give my husband at my launch event a few minutes to get up and talk, and he went up, and the very first thing he said was that Enzo didn't get a tip that night. And people laughed just as hard as you all did. It was so witty how he just came up with that. But now when you read about Enzo, you will know, you will have all of that background where I got that name. So let's see. I mentioned this was my third book under contract. I am currently drafting my fourth novel. It is going to be a sequel to The Lost Apothecary. I'm glad you're all excited. It's actually a sequel and a prequel. So one of the points of view predates The Lost Apothecary, and you will have minor familiarity with that character. And then the other two characters are after The Lost Apothecary, and it begins literally just moments after the end of The Lost Apothecary. So I'm really excited. However, it is taking me forever. I already asked for a 6-month extension. We had 2 hurricanes hit our home city last fall, and that really screwed up my mental health and just all kinds of things. So I asked for an extension, and I'm still running pretty, I don't know how it's going to get done. And it's sort of funny because a couple of days ago, my literary agent, emailed me, and she just said, "Hey, Sarah, how's book tour going? How's your energy, your stamina, all that? Is everything good? Can we do anything?" And I said, everything is great, but I'm still stressing about the first draft of book 4, and I'm still not sure if I'm going to make my revised deadline. And I was hoping that she was going to respond back and say, "Don't worry about a thing. We will ask for more time. I got you. Like, don't stress. Enjoy your tour." That is not what she said. She responded, and in bold letters with little asterisks, said, "We know you're going to get this done by the revised deadline." So, no pressure. So yeah, that's what I have to look forward to when I'm home next week. I got to get hustling on book 4. So anyways, that is what I'm working on. I did also have a short story come out in January of this year. I see some nodding, so some of you have read it. It's called The Conjurer's Wife. It is on an online platform where you would get your short stories, but I'm in an independent bookstore, so I don't want to name them. But you can read it in 45 minutes. It's The Conjurer's Wife, as I said. It's about a woman. She is married to a very well-known magician in Venice in 1821, and on the eve of his greatest sold-out performance, she discovers a very dark secret about him and decides to seek vengeance. So it's very on-brand with the types of stories that I write. So you can read that, and after I wrap up book 4, I fully expect to sign another contract for a couple of more. I love working. I love talking to readers. I have lots of story ideas. I've kind of got an idea for book 5, beginning to, again, plant the seeds. And I haven't told anybody, even Mark, my husband, where it's set, because authors are sort of notorious in these early ideation stages. We like to keep things to ourselves. And a lot of people, and I'm one of them, believe that ideas sort of float around in the universe. Liz Gilbert talks about this in her book, Big Magic, that ideas float around, and if you don't grab it, it's going to go to someone else. And I fully believe that, and so I don't want my idea leaving my brain quite yet. So that would be book 5, though. We have to get book 4 drafted. I can't get ahead of myself. So that's what I'm working on. I do a lot of speaking around the country to readers. Something I'm very passionate about is talking to aspiring writers in particular, because I don't have an MFA, I don't have a literature degree. I worked at Koch Industries for 10 years and Price Waterhouse for 3 in back office finance. And now I'm standing here, totally different career field. And I especially talk to a lot of women who are sort of dealing with families, day jobs, other responsibilities, but they want to write a book. And so that's something I feel really passionate about, is helping coach and inspire through that that indecision and sort of where do I go from here. So that's something I'm really into. So I feel like I've talked for a bit, so maybe I'll open it up to questions. And yes, in the red.
I'm going to bring a microphone around so that everyone can hear the questions.
Thank you so much for being here. The Lost Apothecary recently kept me up all night on a work night. Darn you. I just posted a 5-star review on Goodreads. So there were book club discussion questions in that book. Can you tell me how that process goes?
Yeah, absolutely. So all 3 of my books have book club kits on my website, which is therapenner.com. I just dropped the Amalfi Curse book club kit about 10 days ago. It's the most fun of them all because I love Canva. Does anyone here know? Yeah. Oh my gosh. So if I were to go back to the corporate workforce, which I never will, but if I did, I would go to Canva and be like, I want to work for you. I love the graphic design stuff. And so I did my whole kit for this book in Canva. So there are discussion questions with spoilers, so don't go out reading them if you haven't yet read the book. I also did a whole antipasti menu with recipes. So my first 2 books have just a couple of recipes, but book clubs love them. And I've gone to so many book clubs where they have created these themed menus. And so I just decided to take some of that legwork out of it for you and give you my themed menu they're sort of finger foods, that would be great for book clubs. So all of those recipes are on my site, and then I did an activity for the first time. So book clubs love activities. With the Lost Apothecary, a lot of book clubs did like make your own poison essential oil blends and or paint your own vials, stuff like that. So I did a lemon sugar scrub that you can sort of buy the bulk ingredients, and book clubs can sip their wine and blend their sugar scrub and have fun with it. So that's all out there. I do it because I love it. The Lost Apothecary book club kit, my publisher asked me to write it up when they released the paperback, so they had some fun bonus content at the end. But they haven't asked me for any book club stuff for Amalfi Curse. But I know my book clubs by now and that they love it. So I did that for them, or for you all. So yeah, it's a little bit of being asked and then just taking the initiative myself because it's fun. What other questions? Yes?
Hello, Sarah. My question is, I think just as society and being a woman, a lot of milestones are kind of like, when you turn 30, you should be XYZ. So can you kind of if you could give one piece of advice to anyone of like, it's not too late to do a career change, it's not too late to chase your dream of being a writer, etc., what would you say?
Yeah, so Lessons in Chemistry, that author, I don't want to misspeak, but I think she's like maybe late 60s. Obviously, mega multi-million bestseller. It's her debut. So I think that she is probably the most recent, relevant example that it's never too late. And there are a lot of authors who debut later in life. I mean, they have the most knowledge and real-world experience of given all of their years of exposure to work and family and feelings, all of the things that need to go into a book. So, but, I think there's a lot of, how should I say this? Be careful what you spend your time consuming on social media, because you can drive yourself crazy letting yourself believe that everybody else has it figured out younger than you have it figured out. And that's where I think you need to set boundaries around the type of content and whose content you're consuming. And remember that it's not a competition and that everyone sort of has their own journey. And there are people absolutely on Instagram, peers, authors, that I have a lot of respect for, that I have to mute them or hide their stuff because I find it creating sort of an uncomfortable feeling that might be competitiveness or professional envy or what have you. So I would say if you find yourself ever thinking that you're too late or you're not where you should be, ask yourself if you're maybe spending too much time thinking about what other people are doing, and set boundaries around that, because That's the worst thing for creativity, is if you feel like you're doing it to catch up with somebody instead of inventing it for the love of the art. Yes?
So, I think I can hear you too. I'm happy to repeat it.
So I read the first two books. I clearly just started this one, but they're all kind of mysterious, magical. So have you always liked magical books, or what were some of your favorite books, or what inspired you to write in that genre?
Yeah, I've gotten this question every single tour stop for this book, and it's weird because I didn't get this question a lot for book 2, and so I'm realizing now when you've written 3 books with sort of someone used the word esoteric, which I think is a good word, so now I've set a trend, and so it makes sense that people continue to ask this. It's sort of the magic and the speculative element. So in the industry, we call my books speculative fiction. Speculative is anything that can kind of not be real. So magic, witchcraft, seances, etc. It sort of happened by accident. And it began with The Lost Apothecary because Eliza, everyone's favorite character, the 12-year-old, she's so youthful and she's not jaded by life, and so she views a lot of what's happening in the world through this playful lens of magic. And my editor at the time absolutely loved that and encouraged me to amplify Eliza's magical viewpoint of the world. So I did, and then immediately it was clear when it got into the hands of readers, they loved her and her magic viewpoints as well. So when it came to book 2, and I knew I wanted to write a ghost story, I wanted to stay clear of haunted houses, I went the seance route. So book 2, for anyone who hasn't read it, it's about a spiritualist or a medium in Victorian London who's skilled in the art of seance, particularly conjuring the spirits of murder victims to ascertain the identity of the people who killed them. So with book 2, they were like, we want to make sure you're staying in that speculative realm because readers really like that. So I thought, well, that's great. Seances fit into that because we're talking ghosts and paranormal. And then with book 3, The Amalfi Curse, it was just a given. I now have sort of established my brand as historical fiction with elements of magic and mystery. So that is what you can expect, and it's working really well. And that cross-genre space is not saturated like, say, World War II historical fiction, for instance, which every other week we see a new book coming out in that space. There's nothing wrong with that. It's the reason that publishers keep publishing that is because readers love it. But there's not a lot of speculative historical fiction. So one of my favorite books that actually kind of got me into this genre was The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova. I also loved The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. That fits under the magical realism umbrella. Some that they don't have a speculative element, but also made me fall in love with historical fiction. I like everything by Philippa Gregory, Castles and Scandal, what more do you want, or can you want? And then Ken Follett as well. So I think that he writes really conflict-heavy, multi-point of view stories that I find super entertaining. So those are a few. And then a couple of books that I've read really recently, they're in other genres. Well, this first one is historical fiction, but The Stolen Queen by Fiona Davis came out in January. It's dual timeline. Most of her stories just take place in New York, but this one, her character also goes to Egypt on an archaeological dig, so that was really interesting. And it's about the Met Gala, which is coming up. I just saw it today on the internet. I don't really follow pop culture, but I was actually Googling Travis Kelce to see, what are he and Taylor doing? And they've fallen off the radar. There's got to be some juicy info there. And he was apparently spotted in New York a few days ago, so everybody's thinking he and Taylor will be at the Met Gala. It's so weird that I'm even talking about this. I do not care about this stuff. I really don't care about this stuff, but I don't know. I am curious. I mean, we all probably are. And then also I read L.A. Women. I read an advanced copy. It comes out in June. That's by Ella Berman. Has old Hollywood, 1960s Hollywood, and all of their crazy, scandalous, opulent parties. So I would recommend checking that out if you're into old L.A. That was really good too.
Did you write another genre?
would I write another genre? So for those of you who've read my books, you know that I love cliffhangers and twists, and my favorite scenes to write are the really quick-paced scenes where there are discoveries or running from something, a ticking clock, all of these things that fit under the thriller umbrella. And I have always thought that maybe someday I would write a contemporary thriller. Yeah, but probably not, the next few books, but maybe someday. Yeah, hi, Jillian.
Hi, how are you?
Great, how are you?
If you were going to set up your perfect scuba diving shipwreck, what would you find in the ship?
Ooh, I love that. So this is Jillian. She wrote The Rhino Keeper. When did that come out?
October.
Last October?
Yeah.
Yep. So be sure to check that one out. What would I find in my perfect shipwreck? It would not be something of monetary value. It would be, I think, probably like a love letter that maybe a hidden relationship that two people were in love and couldn't talk about it because maybe their families didn't get along or had different beliefs or something, but they were in love and that was like a record of it. That's what I would find. Which, kind of fits the story that I wrote too. So, I love anything archival in nature, manuscripts, letters, diaries, logs, sailors' logs, what have you. So that's why you see that stuff in all of my books. So I think it would be some sort of letter. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Stevie. One of the things I love about your books is how I can be so enthralled with two different time periods, and one is already over, but you're still just what's going to happen in the past. And so I think you've done a really good job of going between them and just kind of building that mystery of you keep getting a little more information and they're connected more. How do you go about, I guess, the process of the thrill, adding enough that it's a little bit of a hint, and is that a difficult thing to do or something you've learned to do?
Yeah, so what I kind of hear you saying is the drip feed of tension, and we also would refer to that as pacing, pacing the story. You can't give the reader half a book of very slow, dull information and then load all the exciting stuff in the back half. So pacing and sort of drip feeding the tension happens during revisions, because when you're drafting a story, you just sort of write what you need to get down. But then through revisions, that's where I sort of break it up into its scenes and its chapters. It's where I start to weave together the two timelines. So let's say, and I like to end my chapters on cliffhangers or twists. And so when I feel like I've gotten to that highest tension moment, and the reader is like, oh my gosh, what is the next sentence? I cut the chapter, and then I fast forward 200 years into the next point of view. It's aggravating for the reader. I know this, and I do it on purpose. Because then, a few pages later, you don't care about that anymore. You care about this new scene and the conflict that I've presented in this chapter. And then I cut that one, and I go back to what you wanted just a few pages ago. So that happens during revisions. It does not hit the page that way in the first draft. It's you write the whole thing, and then you weave it, you cut and paste it, you rearrange it. That type of revision. That's what revisions. They say writing is revising, and it's because of that. But I think that dual timeline fiction, when done well, can make for really good page turners because of that. And I hear a lot of readers say they lost sleep or couldn't turn the pages fast enough, and I do that strategically, and it's really fun when it's done well, but it doesn't hit the page effortlessly like when you're reading it. It takes a lot of time and a lot of editorial guidance to get there. Yes, Lily.
What was your favorite book to write? What hit the most with you?
What was my favorite book to write? They've all been sort of unique in their own ways. I think I would say this one because of the scuba diving scenes specifically. They just flowed right out. I wrote them very quickly. And I read a lot, but I haven't read underwater scenes in commercial fiction, and I haven't read underwater shipwreck scenes, and I really am fascinated by shipwrecks. I think I was 12 or 13 when the Titanic came out, very impressionable age, so I was obsessed with that topic for a while. And so getting to write something that I knew I would love reading, it just flowed, and that made it really fun.
Do you see yourself predominantly keeping all of your fiction in Europe, or do you see yourself expanding to other continents?
Do I see myself keeping my fiction in Europe? That's such a great question, and something I ask myself too. I really like the South, so I love New Orleans, I love Charleston, I love Savannah, and I've toyed with writing a book in one or all of those areas. But, I mentioned earlier, about saturated markets, and there's a lot of books set in those locations, and I have found success, not that London also doesn't have a ton of books, don't get me wrong, and it's sort of the fresh premise, so an apothecary who sells poison, for instance. But I kind of want to stay as fresh and unsaturated as I can with what I'm putting out there, and if I kind of would like to do something in an Arctic setting someday. I don't think it's next or even in the next couple of books. The problem with that is it's really remote, and the types of stories I write don't really lend themselves to remote settings. High stakes, a lot of people affected if something goes wrong. You just don't have that in a remote setting. So I need a populated area. I need a city that feels kind of sexy so that readers want to pick it up. And yeah, it just so happens a lot of readers love Western Europe and Old World Europe, but I am kind of toying with an idea that's not in that location for my next book. Yeah, hi Tina.
Hi. So you mentioned you have this deadline for your next book. What happens when you get writer's block? How do you overcome that?
Yeah, writer's block. So I always tell writers that writer's block is a symptom that, just like if you have recurring headaches, you need to listen to. It's not just something you wait out and it goes away. And so I don't really get writer's block, because as soon as I find myself stumbling over a scene or trudging through, I call it trudging through mud when you're trying to write, that's a symptom. And what that symptom is that something is inherently wrong with the scene. Maybe you're telling it from the wrong point of view. Maybe the scene doesn't have enough conflict. Maybe it's too much internal conflict and musing on feelings, and what you really need to do is throw some bad guy in the scene or have some sort of external issue. So for anyone in here who's a writer, one of my favorite resources is called Manuscript Makeover. I don't even think it's in print still, but you can get it on eBay. The author is Elizabeth Lyon. And one of the things that she has in that is a list of 30 or 40 scene problems. So things that a scene might be lacking if it's not flowing well for you. And I refer to that a lot if I feel like I am getting this quote-unquote writer's block. But I think it's actually a gift instead of something to be dreaded, because it's literally like a road sign saying, turn here. Don't keep going this direction. Turn here. So I think that if you listen to that instead of just saying, oh, I have writer's block, I'm not going to write today, or oh, this manuscript sucks, I'm a terrible writer, listen to your intuition, and it's not letting the scene flow, probably because there's something wrong with the scene, or it's not the scene that needs to be next. Yes?
I heard rumors of the Lost Apothecary going to the screen.
Yeah.
So what can you tell us about that?
Why is everyone laughing?
We want it.
Yeah, I want it too. Okay, so Fox Entertainment sat on that option for 3 years. Lots of books that you all love are sitting just bobbing along in the water while these huge production companies sit on the options. They sold it last year to an all-women, all-run production team in the UK known as Monumental. I don't think it's affiliated with the Monumental that we know here in the States, but they haven't done anything with it. I'm not surprised. I'm not holding my breath. I honestly don't even think about it until readers ask. So rest assured, if you follow me on social media and there is an announcement related to the screen for any of my books, I will be shouting it loud and clear. But I have no further information for you. But crossing my fingers, of course. Maybe the sequel will regenerate, some talk about it. Any other questions? Yes?
Out of the 3 books that you've written so far, plus your one online, is there a character that you relate with the most, or that you have favoritism for?
Is there a character I relate with or have favoritism for? There's kind of 2. In The Lost Apothecary, Caroline, she's in love with the city of London, and I very much relate to that. She also doesn't like textbook history, but loves historical, real life stories. She's intrigued by real sort of middle class everyday people instead of the battles and the wars and the politicians. All of that textbook history in high school, it was my least favorite subject. And now here I am writing historical fiction. I just never would have imagined that. So I related to that. She loved going in and looking at the maps in the British Library, that John Roke map that she is mentioned several times in the story. I have 4 or 5 copies of it. I love that map. I use it regularly for anything I'm writing that's set in Old London. So I relate to her in those ways. And then, so that was Caroline. And then Haven, in this new story, the nautical archaeologist, something that I have observed in myself as I continue to write is that my women characters are becoming a little more outspoken, have more agency, and I love that is sort of the direction my characters are going. And there are a couple of scenes in which you see Haven being really stubborn and even disregarding the advice of her best friend who's trying to watch out for her because she wants what she wants. And you see her from a professional perspective. A lot of the women in my stories, they are really good at what they do. They're kind of tech savvy. Haven is using AI tools to render 3-dimensional images of shipwrecks. That was all just sort of my own idea, and I researched what's called photogrammetry, which is about these renderings. And I love that techie stuff. So I relate to that. I relate to her stubbornness. I relate to her love of scuba diving and sort of her worldviews. Also, she is grieving the loss of her father. And I lost my dad more than 10 years ago, so I can relate to that. And in many ways, her affection for him and their relationship is spot on some of the sentiments I have about my dad. So I think that a lot of authors, there are different elements of us in the characters that we write. And book 2, that because there's the element of seance and ghost hunting and all of that, grief is sort of explored in a different way in that story. And in Victorian London, these seances, which were so popular, it was because families and friends wanted to connect with people they loved that they'd lost. And grief is a human experience, no matter what era you're in. So that was sort of another exploration that I could relate to, but I didn't have a present-day, assertive, professional, techie woman in that book like I did books 1 and 3.
We probably have time for one more.
Perfect. Yes.
Hi. So this is kind of specific to book 2. Did you, when you were researching that book, did you get to book 1? I don't know. The Lost Apothecary. Book 1. Did you get to go mudlarking? And if so, did you find anything yourself? Because my 5-year-old and I are obsessed with mudlarking now.
Are you?
Yeah, we watch the YouTube videos.
Oh my gosh, have you been?
No, but she asked me all the time, and I told her for her 13th birthday and her daughter's 18th
Love it.
birthday, we would go
Yes,
mudlarking.
okay. So mudlarking has been around forever, but it was starting to become a little more popular, and my mother-in-law here in the purple, I don't know if you even know this or remember this, Jackie, but for Christmas, before I wrote The Lost Apothecary, you gave me a book of beautiful mudlarking vines. And I was kind of developing an interest in it. I followed some mudlarkers on Instagram. For those of you who don't know what mudlarking is, it's like beachcombing, but in this case on the River Thames in London. And people all the time find old Roman coins, really cool pottery pieces, shoes from the Tudor era. Like, there's some cool stuff buried out there. And the River Thames, the tide rises and falls 24 feet twice a day. So every time that enormous volume of water is churning up the riverbed and uncovering all of these cool things. So, yes, I went mudlarking in 2019. If you scroll to the very bottom of my Instagram, you can see a photo of what I found. I brought it back to the hotel. I brought it all back to the hotel. I got my permit. It's very hard to get a permit now, so do your research, because mudlarking is like extraordinarily popular now. And I brought it all the stuff I found back to my hotel room. I took some pictures. I set aside the things that spoke to me the most, which were mostly these really beautiful pottery pieces. I asked myself whether the airlines would let me carry some of it home, and anything I didn't keep, I returned to the river the next day. So mudlarking, I had so much fun. It's really serene. It's actually very quiet. You're in the middle of central London, but it's really quiet. And there's a lot. They actually are doing a display right now. I think the museum, London Museum or something. So if anyone's into that, just Google mudlarkers on Instagram, and you'll find a lot of things. People Magazine actually just did an online feature this week on the different things I've done for each book. And so they featured mudlarking for book 1, a seance I went to with my mom for book 2, and then the scuba diving for book 3. So there's a really cool picture of me walking through an archive in Naples, and a really cool picture, one of my favorite photos of all photos I've ever had, of me and Mark in front of a shipwreck in the Keys. And the shipwreck is behind us, and then in front of us is a stingray that's 12 feet across, enormous. And I'm clutching his hand because the photographer just had pointed at the sand, and I saw he was pointing at a stingray, and it was scary. So, so I like to do fun stuff. So this has been really amazing. I think we're going to now do signing and, like I said, photos, but I just want to say thank you all so much for being here and coming out to support me. This is an amazing crowd, and I hope you love the Amalfi Curse.